You know that feeling when you finally pay something off? It's visceral, isn't it? You log into your credit card portal or maybe your student loan servicer and you see that balance staring back at you. Maybe it's $5,000, maybe it's 50. And you click that button, submit payment. You watch the little loading circle spin for a second, which always feels like an eternity, and then, boom, zero, balance, $0.20. And you take this deep breath, like your lungs have suddenly expanded an extra 10%. You feel lighter. You feel safe. You feel like a responsible, moral, upstanding adult who is winning at the game of life. We are conditioned, from the time we are literally children saving pennies in a plastic pig, to believe that debt is the enemy. Debt is bad. Debt is stressful. Debt is shackles. And on the flip side, cash? Cash is king. Cash is freedom. We're taught that the ultimate goal of financial success is to have a pile of money in the bank and owe absolutely nothing to anyone. But then, you start looking around. You start looking at the people who are really, really wealthy. I don't mean the guy down the street who drives a leased BMW and stresses about the payments. I mean the people who own the building the dealership is in. I mean the people who own the bank. You look at their balance sheets and you see something that doesn't fit the narrative. You see debt. A lot of it. You see millions, sometimes billions of dollars in liabilities. And they aren't panicked. They aren't losing sleep. In fact, they're scrambling to get more asterisk of it. They are allergic to holding cash and they are addicted to holding debt. And it breaks your brain a little bit. It makes you wonder if everything you were taught about being financially responsible was actually just training wheels for a game the rich aren't even playing. My name is Marcus Sterling, and I spend way too much time, probably an unhealthy amount, if I'm being totally honest, thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth, while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades, clutching their savings accounts while the value melts away. I'm obsessed with the mechanics of wealth that they don't teach you in school, and frankly, that most financial gurus are too scared to tell you about because it sounds risky. But the truth is, the relationship the wealthy have with debt and cash is the fundamental dividing line between the middle class and the 1%. It's not just a different strategy, it's a completely different language. So let's talk about why the rich love debt. And I don't mean they tolerate it. I mean they actively seek it out. They want it. And to understand that, we have to start by talking about the thing they hate. Cash. Cash feels safe. It's tangible. You can fold it, you can smell it, it's got that weird cotton paper smell, and you can put it under your mattress if you're paranoid. It represents stored energy. If I have $100, I can trade that for a nice dinner or a new pair of sneakers whenever I want. It feels like stability. But to a wealthy mindset, cash is a trap. It's actually a liability. Why? Because of the silent killer we all know about but rarely truly appreciate: inflation. We talk about inflation like it's just the price of eggs going up, but you have to think about it in terms of your savings. If you have $10,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.01% interest, and inflation is running at 3 or 4%, you are actively losing money every single second of every single day. You are bleeding wealth. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. You feel safe because the water level looks steady, but the water itself is getting diluted. The rich look at a pile of cash and they see an ice cube sitting on the sidewalk in July. It is melting. Every minute it sits there doing nothing, it becomes less. So their first priority is to get rid of the cash. Get it out of the bank. Get it into something real. And this is where debt comes in. See, for most of us, debt is a consumer tool. We use debt to buy things that lose value. We use a credit card to buy a TV. We use a loan to buy a car. The second we buy those things, they are worth less than what we paid, and we are paying interest on top of it. That is bad debt. That is wealth destruction. It's like lighting a fire in your living room to stay warm, but you're burning your furniture. Yeah, you're warm for a minute, but pretty soon you have nowhere to sit. The wealthy use debt as a producer tool. They use it to buy assets that gain value. And this brings us to the most magical word in the entire financial dictionary: leverage. Leverage is the concept that explains why the rich get richer. It's the simple idea of doing more with less. Let me give you a really simple, concrete example. Let's say you and I both have $100,000 to invest. We both want to buy real estate because we heard it's a good idea. You are the safe saver. You hate debt. You want to sleep well at night. So, you find a nice little house that costs exactly $100,000. You write a check for the full amount. You own it free and clear. Zero debt. You feel amazing. I am the smart borrower. I don't mind debt. I want leverage. So instead of buying one house, I decide to buy 4 houses. Each house costs 100 grand. I put $25,000 down on each one. That's my 100 grand used up, and I borrow the rest from the bank. So I have $300,000 in debt. You look at me and say, Marcus, you are crazy. You are up to your eyeballs in debt. I'm free. But let's fast forward 1 year. Let's say the real estate market is decent and property values go up by 5%. Not a boom, just a normal year. Your house, which was worth $100,000, is now worth $105,000. You made $5,000. Since you invested 100 grand of your own cash, your return on investment is 5%. That's okay. It beat a savings account. But let's look at my situation. I own 4 houses. Each one went up by 5%. So each house gained $5,000 in value. That's $5, $10, $15, $20,000 in total gain. Now, remember, I only invested the same $100,000 that you did, but I made $20,000 profit. My return on investment is 20%. You made 5%. I made 20%. I made 4 times as much money as you, simply because I used the bank's money to do it. That is leverage. That is why the rich want debt. They aren't looking at the debt as a burden. They are looking at it as a force multiplier. It allows them to control a massive amount of assets with a relatively small amount of their own money. And here is the kicker, the part that really drives people crazy. Who paid for the debt? Who paid the mortgage on my 4 houses? I didn't. The tenants did. I used other people's money to buy the asset, and then I used other people's money, the rent, to pay off the loan. I am literally creating wealth out of thin air, using nothing but a signature and some strategy. But it goes deeper than just leverage. That's like the entry-level course. The graduate-level reason the rich love debt has to do with the relationship between debt and inflation. We are taught to fear inflation, right? It makes gas expensive. It makes groceries expensive. But if you have a lot of debt, inflation is actually your best friend. In fact, if you were a debtor, you should be praying for inflation. Here's why. Debt is fixed. If I borrow $1 million today to buy an apartment complex, I owe $1 million. That number doesn't change. But the value of money does change. If inflation goes up, the value of the dollar goes down. That means the dollars I used to pay back the loan in 10 years are worth way less than the dollars I borrowed today. I am borrowing expensive, valuable dollars today, and I am paying the bank back with cheap, inflated, worthless dollars tomorrow. It's like borrowing a pristine, vintage bottle of wine from a friend, and then 10 years later, paying them back with a bottle of grape juice, and technically, legally, you are square. And while the debt stays the same, fixed at $1 million, the asset I bought with it, the apartment complex, that goes up with inflation. Rents go up, property values go up, so my debt is getting smaller in real terms, and my asset is getting bigger. The gap between them, my equity, my wealth, explodes. The bank knows this, by the way. They aren't stupid. But they have to lend money to survive. They are in the business of selling debt. If they don't lend, they die. So the wealthy are more than happy to buy the product the bank is selling, because they know how to weaponize it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, Marcus, that's great for buying buildings, but debt is risky. What if I lose my job? What if the market crashes? And that is a valid fear. That is the fear that keeps the system running. It's the fear that keeps us in the slow lane. But the wealthy view risk differently. They view the risk of holding cash, the guarantee of losing value to inflation, as higher than the risk of taking on smart debt. Plus, there is a massive difference between recourse and non-recourse debt. This is a little technical, but hang in there with me because it's important. Most debt you and I have, our mortgage, our car loan, is full recourse. If we stop paying, the bank takes the house. But if the house isn't worth enough to cover the loan, they can come after our other assets. They can garnish wages. They can come for our savings. The ultra-wealthy often use non-recourse debt. That means the loan is secured only by the asset itself. If I buy a $10 million commercial building and the market crashes and everything goes to zero, I can just hand the keys to the bank and walk away. They can't touch my personal bank account. They can't touch my other houses. The risk is siloed. The risk is on the bank, not on me. So, why wouldn't you take that debt? It's heads I win, tails the bank loses. But let's get to the taxes. Because if you want to really understand why the rich avoid cash and hoard debt, you have to look at the tax code. The tax code is basically a treasure map written in boring legal jargon, and X marks the spot where debt lives. Here is a fundamental truth of the universe. Income is taxed. Debt is tax-free. If you work hard and earn $1 million in salary, the government says, "Congratulations, great job. We'll take 40% of that, please and thank you." You are left with 600 grand. But if you borrow $1 million? If you refinance a property and the bank wires $1 million into your checking account, is that income? No, it's a loan. You do not pay a single penny of tax on borrowed money. This is how the billionaires live tax-free lives. They don't sell their stock. Let's look at a guy like Elon or Bezos or any of these titans. They have billions in stock, but they can't buy a super yacht with stock. They need cash. Now, the poor mindset says, okay, I'll sell some stock to get the cash. But if they sell the stock, they trigger a taxable event. They have to pay capital gains tax. That's millions of dollars gone to the IRS. They hate that. They view taxes as a leak in their ship. So what do? They walk into a bank and say, "Look, I have $1 billion in Amazon stock. I'm not going to sell it, but I'll pledge it as collateral. Give me $100 million line of credit." The bank says, "Absolutely, sir. Here is your checkbook. The interest rate is 3%. So now they have $100 million cash to spend. They pay zero taxes on it because it's a loan, and they pay 3% interest to the bank. Think about the math on that. Would you rather pay 20% or 30% in taxes to the government, or 3% interest to the bank? It's a no-brainer. They are using debt to arbitrage the tax system. They are living on borrowed money, letting their assets grow in the background usually faster than the interest rate on the debt, and they effectively opt out of the tax system that the rest of us are stuck in. And honestly, when you realize this, it kind of makes you angry, doesn't it? It feels like cheating. It feels like they found a cheat code in the video game that gives them infinite ammo while the rest of us are scavenging for scraps. But being angry doesn't help your bank account. Understanding it does. The problem is, we have an emotional attachment to paying things off. We think the goal is to be at zero. But zero is a neutral position. Zero is standing still. Wealth is movement. Wealth is velocity. When you have cash sitting in a bank, it has zero velocity. It's stagnant water. Stagnant water breeds mosquitoes and disease. Moving water generates power. Debt is how you create movement. Let's talk about opportunity cost for a second. This is a concept that haunts me when I think about how I used to handle money. Imagine you have $50,000 cash. You saved it up. It took you 3 years. You're so proud of it. And you have a student loan that is $50,000 with a 4% interest rate. The responsible thing to do, the thing your parents would tell you to do, is take that cash and pay off the loan. Get debt-free. So you do it. You write the check. The loan is gone. You save yourself that 4% interest payment. You feel that relief we talked about earlier. But now your cash is gone. You are at zero. 2 weeks later, the opportunity of a lifetime comes along. Maybe your neighbor is moving quickly and wants to sell his rental property for half price. Maybe a business partner wants to start a venture that is guaranteed to boom. You need $50,000 to get in, but you don't have it. You sent it to the student loan company. You saved 4% interest, but you cost yourself the potential to make 50% or 100% or 500% on that new opportunity. That is the opportunity cost of avoiding debt. When you use your own cash to pay for things, you are permanently destroying the optionality of that money. You are killing its potential to do anything else for you, ever again. The rich hoard cash, well, not cash, but access to capital for opportunities. They use debt to pay for the boring stuff, the stable stuff, so they can keep their powder dry for the high-yield stuff. I remember talking to a mentor of mine years ago, a guy who owns more real estate than I can count. I asked him, "Don't you get stressed owing the bank $50 million? He looked at me like I had 3 heads. He took a sip of his coffee, which, by the way, he paid for with a credit card, earning points, and he said, "Marcus, if I owe the bank $50,000, I have a problem. If I owe the bank $50 million, the bank has a problem." That line stuck with me. If I owe $50 million, the bank has a problem. It shifts the power dynamic. When you have enough debt, you and the bank are partners. They need you to succeed. They will work with you. They will restructure loans. They will help you because they don't want to lose their asset. When you have a tiny credit card balance, you are just a number. They will crush you with fees. But when you play the game at a high level, debt becomes a partnership. Now, I want to take a step back here because I can feel some of you getting tense. I can feel the Dave Ramsey energy radiating through the screen. But Marcus, debt is risk. What about 2008? What about people losing their homes? And you are right. You are absolutely right. Leverage is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. If you borrow money to buy an asset and that asset drops in value, you can get wiped out. If you borrow money to buy a business and the business fails, you still owe the money. Debt amplifies the outcome. If the outcome is good, debt makes it great. If the outcome is bad, debt makes it catastrophic. The difference between the rich and the broke who both use debt is what they buy. The broke person uses debt to buy liabilities, cars, clothes, vacations, big TVs, things that go down in value. That is a suicide mission. The rich use debt to buy assets that produce cash flow. And this is the critical safety valve. Cash flow. If I borrow $1 million to buy an apartment building, I don't care if the value of the building goes down next year. I really don't. Why? Because I'm not selling it next year. All I care about is, does the rent cover the debt payment? If the rent checks coming in are $10,000 a month and the mortgage payment is $7,000 a month, I am safe. The asset is paying for its own debt. I can ride out any market crash because I don't have to feed the beast. The beast feeds itself. That is the secret to sleeping well at night with millions in debt. You ensure the asset creates enough income to service the debt. If you do that, the debt isn't a liability on your shoulders, it's just a line item on a spreadsheet. But let's talk about the psychological shift, because that's the hardest part. The math is easy. I can show you the math on a spreadsheet in 5 minutes and prove that debt creates more wealth. But the psychology? That's hard. We are evolved to hoard. Our ancestors survived by hoarding food for the winter. If you had a pile of nuts and berries, you lived. If you didn't, you died. We have that same lizard brain instinct with money. We think a pile of money means survival. But money isn't nuts and berries. Money is a man-made construct that is constantly being manipulated by central banks and governments. The rules of nature don't apply to fiat currency. In the wild, a nut is a nut. It has the same calories today as it did 1,000 years ago. In the economy, a dollar is not a dollar. A dollar today is worth 95 cents next year. So you have to fight your biology. You have to fight that instinct that says hoard cash. You have to train your brain to see cash as a decaying asset, like a banana that's slowly turning brown on the counter. You don't want to keep bananas for 10 years. You want to trade them for something durable, like a tree that grows more bananas. This is why you see wealthy people constantly moving money. They get cash from a business deal. Boom, it goes into real estate. They get cash from a refinance. Boom, it goes into stocks or a new venture. They are terrified of the cash drag, the performance drag, on their portfolio caused by holding uninvested cash. There's a great quote, and I'm probably butchering it, but it's something like, "The poor work for money. The rich make money work for them." We've all heard it. It's a cliché, but have you really thought about what it means? Making money work for you literally means lending it out or investing it. But the ultimate level is making other people's money work for you. When you work a 9-to-5 job, you are trading your time for money. It's a linear equation. You work 1 hour, you get paid X dollars. If you stop working, the money stops. When you use debt to buy assets, you are breaking that link. You are setting up a machine, a rental property, a business, a dividend portfolio that works 24/7. And you built that machine using parts you borrowed from the bank. Imagine you could build a robot that goes to work for you. And the bank says, "Hey, we'll lend you the money to build the robot. You just have to give us a tiny piece of the paycheck the robot earns." Would you say, "No thanks, I want to pay for the robot with my own savings, so I'll wait 20 years until I can afford it"? Of course not. You'd borrow the money, build the robot today, pay the bank their cut and keep the difference. And then you'd go borrow money to build 10 more robots. That is what the rich are doing. They are building an army of robots using the bank's money. Meanwhile, the rest of us are trying to do the work of the robots ourselves, saving our pennies, hoping one day we can retire. It's a different game. Now look, I'm not sitting here telling you to go out tomorrow, max out your credit cards, and buy crypto. Please do not do that. That is not what we are talking about. There is a hierarchy of debt. At the bottom, the toxic sludge is consumer debt, credit cards at 20% interest, payday loans, financing a vacation. This is radioactive. It destroys wealth. Avoid this like the plague. In the middle, you have low-interest debt on depreciating assets. Maybe a car loan at 2% or 3%. It's not great because the car is losing value. But if the rate is low enough, lower than inflation, it's arguably mathematically better than paying cash. But it's still not building wealth. At the top, the golden tier is low-interest, fixed-rate debt on appreciating, cash-flowing assets. This is the sweet spot. Mortgages on rental properties. Business loans to expand a profitable company. This is the good debt that makes you rich. The problem is, most people lump all three of those categories into one bucket labeled BAD. They pay off their 3% mortgage with the same intensity that they pay off a 20% credit card. And mathematically, that is a disaster. If you have a mortgage at 3% or 4%, and you pay it off early, you are effectively earning a 3% or 4% return on your money. That is your ROI. If you took that same extra money and put it into the S&P 500, historically you might get 8% or 10%. If you put it into a rental property with leverage, you might get 15% or 20%. So by paying off the cheap debt, you are paying a massive opportunity cost. You are choosing a 3% return when you could have had 10% or 20%. Over a lifetime, that difference isn't just a few bucks. It's millions. It's the difference between retiring at 65 with a paid-off house and a modest 401k, and retiring at 45 with a real estate portfolio and generational wealth. But again, it requires letting go of the security blanket. It requires accepting that paid off isn't the highest goal. Optimized is the highest goal. And honestly, there's another layer to this, a darker layer. The system is designed to punish savers. Think about what happens when the government prints money. We saw this in 2020, 2021. Trillions of dollars entered the economy. If you were a saver, holding cash, your purchasing power got diluted. You didn't do anything wrong, but you got poorer. If you were a debtor, holding assets, the value of your assets skyrocketed. House prices went up 20%, 30%, 40%. Stock prices soared, and your debt stayed the same. The government basically inflated the debt away. They bailed out the borrowers at the expense of the savers. This happens over and over again in history. Inflation is a tax on people who hold currency. So, holding cash is actually a vote of confidence in the government's ability to manage the currency. Holding debt and assets is a hedge against their incompetence. When you look at it that way, taking on debt feels less like a risk and more like a protective shield. It's a way to short the dollar. You are betting that the dollar will be worth less in the future than it is today. And looking at history, that is a bet that wins 100% of the time. So, how do we apply this? How do we stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a capitalist? It starts with the question you ask yourself before a purchase. The consumer asks, can I afford the monthly payment? The saver asks, can I pay cash for this? The wealthy mindset asks, what is the cost of capital and what is the return on capital? If the return is higher than the cost, you borrow. Period. It's just math. If I can borrow at 5% and earn 10%, I will do that trade all day long, every day, until the bank cuts me off. I will borrow as much as I possibly can, because the spread, that 5% difference, is free money. This is why companies like Apple issue bonds. Apple has billions of dollars in cash. Piles of it. Yet, they borrow money. Why? Because their cash is overseas and bringing it back would trigger taxes. Or because they can borrow so cheaply, sometimes at 2% or 3%, that they can take that borrowed money, buy back their own stock, and drive the share price up by more than the interest cost. They are manufacturing value using debt. If the biggest, most profitable company in the world is borrowing money when they don't need to, maybe we should pay attention. Maybe needing the money isn't the prerequisite for borrowing it. Maybe the prerequisite is just the ability to use it profitably. I want you to try a mental exercise next time you look at your finances. Instead of looking at your debt as a hole you have to dig out of, look at it as a tool in your belt. Look at your mortgage. That's not a burden. That is a hedge against inflation. That is a low-interest asset that lets you control a property worth 5 times as much. Look at your credit score. That's not a trophy to polish. That is a key that unlocks access to other people's money. If you have an 800 credit score and you aren't using it to acquire assets, it's like having a Ferrari and never taking it out of the garage. You have the potential for speed, but you're parked. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an emergency fund. You absolutely should. You need liquidity for when life punches you in the face, because life will punch you in the face. The wealthy keep cash reserves, but they treat it as an insurance policy, not an investment. It's there to stop the bleeding, not to grow the body. The bulk of the net worth shouldn't be in the checking account. It should be in the dirt, in the bricks, in the equity. It's a scary transition. I remember the first time I decided not to pay off a loan. I had the cash. It was sitting there, and I had a car loan at 1.9%. My brain was screaming, pay it off. Be free. But I forced myself to take that cash and put it into a brokerage account. I bought an index fund. It felt wrong. It felt risky. But 5 years later, that index fund was up 60%. The car loan cost me basically nothing in interest. I came out thousands of dollars ahead. That was the moment the switch flipped for me. I realized that my feelings were expensive. My desire for the emotional relief of zero debt was costing me literal money. The rich don't make decisions based on feelings. They make decisions based on spreadsheets. They don't care about the emotional weight of debt. They care about the mathematical weight of equity. And look, maybe you don't want to be a billionaire. Maybe you just want to be comfortable. That's fine. You can absolutely retire comfortably by just saving cash and paying off debt. It works. It's the slow, safe, scenic route. But if you want to speed up, if you want to compress 40 years of wealth building into 10, you cannot do it with cash. You are limited by how much you can earn and save. And for most of us, that limit is too low. Debt removes the limit. It decouples your ability to invest from your ability to earn. It lets you step on the gas. So, the next time you hear someone bragging about being debt-free, don't just blindly nod and say, "Wow, good for you." I mean, sure, be happy for them, they achieved a goal. But ask yourself, is that the most efficient use of capital? Or are they celebrating the fact that they just parked their car on the side of the highway while everyone else is zooming past? Cash is comfort. Debt is power. Cash is the past money you already earned. Debt is the future money you haven't earned yet, pulled into the present to build your life. The wealthy live in the future. The poor live in the past. Shift your mindset. Stop being afraid of the tool just because you've seen people cut themselves with it. Learn how to handle the saw. Learn how to use the leverage. Because the system isn't going to change. Inflation isn't going away. Taxes aren't going down. The rules of the game are set. You can either play by the rules of the safe saver and get slowly eroded by inflation, or you can play by the rules of the smart borrower and ride the wave. It's your choice. But personally, I'd rather owe $1 million and own $5 million than owe yeah and own it. Thanks for hanging out and letting me rant about this. It's heavy stuff, I know. It goes against everything our grandmas taught us. But sometimes grandma was hiding money in the mattress because she didn't know better. We do. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the twisted psychology of money, do me a favor, hit that like button. It costs you $0, creates no debt, and the ROI for me is huge. I appreciate you. I'm Marcus Sterling, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep thinking.